Whatever it is that you feel that you should be doing, you can do it. And you start with small steps, but do not feel in your mind that there is something I should be doing and I'm not doing it. If you feel you should be going to Minyan, then get up and go to Minyan, yes? If you feel you should be learning, then learn. Learn for a little bit of time and do it. You can't have a version of yourself in your head that you are like a criminal, that you are no good. If you know it's something you're supposed to do, just do it, even if it's a small amount. And then you'll get there.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the BEN podcast. Today's topic is called Shining Light on the Overlooked. Now, I sat down with Rav Ron, who is famously known as a teacher in Midreshet Harova, who taught in Yeshiva Netiv Aryeh, and he also currently teaches in Midreshet Moriah. He's an awesome person. He's just like filled with energy, and I had an absolute blast. And I actually spent probably half of this episode just laughing over the funny stories and just the conversations that we had together. So I'm super excited for you guys to listen to what we spoke about and get ready. Buckle your seatbelts and enjoy this episode with me and Rav Ron. Welcome to the Israel Gap Year BEN podcast. I'm your host, Zvi Proctor, and in each episode, we get BEN in depth into the remarkable lives of individuals in Israel who dedicate themselves to inspiring the next generation of Klal Yisrael. Welcome, Rav Ron.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me and coming all the way from Neve Daniel.
Yeah.
This is an absolute zuchus, and I know we've been working on this one for a while. And the topic that I want to speak about with you today is shining light on the overlooked. That's what we titled it, but it's going to be a lot of things about your life and going to be super geschmack. So, we're sitting here today after you've worked in many different yeshiva and seminaries.
Yeah.
Have written many seforim yourself.
Yes.
Kind of take me through your background. How did we get here today? And
how did we get here today? Well, I grew up in Flatbush, Brooklyn. And so here's the deal. My parents, I'm first generation American. My father is a Holocaust survivor from Czechoslovakia. My mother was born in Israel to Hungarian Holocaust survivors. So I grew up in Brooklyn. I live on Coney Island Avenue, across the street from my grandfather. He had a shul there, a little shul of all Holocaust survivors. I grew up not speaking English. And our family, we only spoke Hebrew. I started learning English when we went to Flatbush, nursery school, kindergarten. And they had then Ivrit be'Ivrit, so that was good. I'm like, hey, Hebrew. And then they'd go English. I'm like, okay. And then I learned English. And it was a very, very non-American upbringing. And we were always non-American. We never celebrated Thanksgiving. We don't watch sports. We don't play sports. We read books. That's what we do. And that's how I grew up. And there was a lot of learning and a lot of, let's call it textual Jewish learning, but also a lot of reading in general. We would read all kinds of stuff in English also, So there was this kind of holistic blend of Kodesh and regular stuff. I remember on Sundays, my father used to drive us down to Barnes & Noble in Manhattan, and we'd go to the Annex, and we'd buy old textbooks from college classes, and I'd read them at home and learn stuff and all that kind of stuff. So it was very, very, a lot of learning, and it was a very, I'm going to say, non-tense environment. There was no tension between Jewish life and regular kind of life. It was just a very holistic kind of a blend. And then since we're not American, my parents always said we're not going to stay in America for a long time. And then when I graduated Flatbush High School, I have two younger sisters. My family said, that's it, we're moving to Israel. And I moved to Israel, the whole family, and I went directly to Shalvim, directly into Hesder. I was at Shalvim for 8 years. And what happened was, in my Shana Hay, because I was Hesder, like a Hesder guy, go to the army, the whole business. And then in my Shana Hay, a guy came over to me and said, hey, you want to be my chavrusa? We'll learn Hilchot Shabbos for Rabbanut, to get smicha Rabbanut. And I was not really, and I'm thinking, you know what, I'll just do this, learn for Rabbanut. It was good, because I'll tell you like this. My grandfather growing up across the street, I was very close with my grandfather. And it seemed to me, he was a Rav of a shul, like I said, it seemed to me that his life was amazing. He'd pick us up from school when we were little. We'd go out to a pizza store and whatever. And it seemed to me that at some point in my life, I understood that I'm not cut out for a 9-to-5 job, sitting in some cubicle with Excel sheets and whatever garbage people have to deal with. I'm like, I need a life that's a little bit more, stuff happens, a little bit exciting. And to me, the rabbinic life was that. Every day, different stuff, who knows what's going to be. And that's what happens. I was in Shalvim for 8 years. And then I met my wife, Sharon, and we got married. And the plan was always to have an adventure and go somewhere go some little town and be a rabbi there. And that's when we moved to Richmond, Virginia. I was a rabbi in Richmond for 10 years. And then that was enough. 10 years is a good run. And then it was like, okay, that's a good adventure. And then we came to Israel back, and that's where we are now, Neve Daniel, teaching and all that kind of stuff.
When, you said you were in Hesder, right?
Yeah.
And then you went back to America.
Yeah.
If I told you back then
Yeah.
what you would be doing today,
yeah,
what would you have said?
So I'm going to say that I listen, the secret is I kind of knew that things would go this way. Because if you're in Israel and you're a guy in yeshiva and you like learning, what's going to happen to you, honestly? Mm-hmm. You're going to wind up being a Rav somewhere teaching. That's what's going to happen. And I'm like, wait a second. I'm not ready to do that yet. I need to have a grand adventure beforehand. So then, as if I got my yayas out on this shlichut in Richmond, mm-hmm. I built an Eruv there, charged on the mikvah, all this kind of business, dealing with all kinds of community rabbi type stuff. I'm like, okay, now I had enough of that. I had enough of this, kind of lifestyle. Also, listen, I'm just going to say for the audience members, my feeling is, rabbi child syndrome. You ever hear, that some of these rabbi children, they like rebel and whatever. I think the lifestyle of being a community rabbi is not, for me, something I would want to do my whole life. Mm-hmm. You do it for a while, and then you become a private citizen a little bit. So I knew that I would wind up having to, be a teacher somewhere. That's what would happen. So I had this, and then I came here, and it's kind of as if a little bit the plan. Yeah.
When you came to Eretz Yisrael after those 10 years in Richmond, Virginia, how long did it take you till you got established within the yeshiva and seminary world of teaching?
Well, that's a question. That is a question. So listen to this. I had, basically at 10 years, like, that's it. I'm enough. Like, I did everything I wanted to do over there. And I always told the people in Richmond, I'm not going to stay here forever. And they knew that. I was not going to be a career rabbi, not looking to be in Long Island or something like that. That was not in the cards. I'm not interested in this business. I'm going to go back to Israel. But then you have to come and then get a job. Like, what's going to be? So what happened was literally I had one gig lined up in Machon Gold, Alav Shalom. That doesn't exist anymore, That's a gig that I had. And I also had another gig lined up in Orot College. They had a 1-year girls American type program. Also, Alav Shalom doesn't exist anymore. That's you can't put all your eggs in one basket because things are volatile. Anyway, so I had those 2 gigs lined up. And then all of a sudden, 2 weeks or 3 weeks before I'm moving, I got a call from an old friend of mine in Shalvim. He says, listen, they need a Shana Bet Rebbe in Netiv. I think that would be good for you. I'm like, all right, I got the time, I'm game. And then I came, and the day after my flight, I got an interview. And then I started 2 or 3 weeks later, Elzman. That's what happened.
How many years ago was that when you got the job in TIFF?
Listen, I was there for 16 years, so that was about 20 years ago or something like that. Yeah, that was, yeah.
And then when did you get started teaching in Harova?
That's a question. I don't even remember the exact dates. I'm awful with numbers, but I'll tell you that what happened was while I was at Netiv, so when we first came, we, of course, had this house that we were building in Neve Daniel. But as these things go, it was not ready. So we come to Israel, we got no house. So at the time, Rav Tabori from Alon Shvut was on a sabbatical year in Stern. So we rented his house in Alon Shvut. Fantastic. Now then I got to get to the Rova. So I start hitchhiking to get to Harova. Who picks me up? A nice person by the name of Rav Milston. And then we're in the car and we start talking. I'm like, who are you? I'm me. Who are you? You're you. And we're talking and we become kind of friendly. And he's like, how about if you teach at Harova? I'm like, I'm all kind of booked up right now. I can't do it. then when things collapsed, here and there as they do, I call him up, I say, remember me? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, yeah. So that's when I started working there. So it's from hitchhiking. Yeah.
What a Misa.
But I'll tell you, for real, hitchhiking Misa, for real, I'll tell you for all the audience members to know. The thing that I told you that I wanted to be a Rav, part of the reason was to have like a life of like excitement and adventure, a little bit. But I got into all of that because I read a secular book. There was a secular book I read by Jack Kerouac called On the Road. And this is a book from like the beginning of the Beat Generation and like the pre-hippie hippies. Anyway, it's all about his adventures hitchhiking across America. And I read that book. I'm like, this is it, man. We got to have like a life of like, different stuff going on. So even to this day, we only have one car. I let my wife use it all the time. And I hitchhike here and there and all that kind of stuff. It's nice.
But she let you use the car to come today.
Yeah, today, because my wife, as an act of chesed, gave me the car today, so that was special.
Baruch Hashem. So, on the topic of teaching in Harova and Ativ and within that world.
Midreshet and Moriah now I teach. That's where I teach right now. Midreshet, Moriah, Harova, and that's it. Ativ, not anymore, but yeah.
So on the topic of teaching,
yes.
When it comes to you specifically, I feel like what is kind of unique about yourself and in your teaching style is sometimes you might teach certain topics within Torah that would be neglected, right? So in your mind, what are some Torah topics that would you say are neglected, that are overlooked by some people, and why do you think we should learn some of those things?
Well, first of all, you got to learn it because it's part of Torah. So you just have to learn it as such, right? Torah is very wide. There's a lot of things. But I like to teach the things. Listen, first of all, I feel that there's like, I don't know, anyone could teach kashrut. Kashrut is kashrut. Hey, Hilchot Shabbos. Open up Shulchan Aruch. Let's read Mishnah Berurah. Fantastic, yes? So I thought, hey, but what about all of these other things that people don't know about? This is going to be new to them. So that's why when it comes to Tanakh, I like to teach, Sefer Daniel, Ezra Nehemiah, Treyasar, Habakkuk. I love that kind of stuff. Zechariah. Then you read this stuff, and it's like, hey, look at all this exciting new things I didn't even know was there. Yes? So you can't, have these, like there's this Torah out there just waiting to be learned by people. Yes? So I like to teach those kinds of things. Yes. In addition to regular stuff here and there, but primarily, like I have a class that I teach also of Agadata. The story parts of the Gemara. You've been to yeshiva, the stuff you always skip. When you're learning the Masechtas there, like, okay, we're going to now go a page ahead because there's just stories over there. But what about the stories then? So all that. I'll tell you, even in Ativ, I would have this policy in Ativ. We would learn Gemara, Rashi, Taisvis in Shir, and we said there's a no skipping policy. Every Taisvis we do. And then I say, so that way you can't say, oh, this is a boring Tosas. Who cares? The mission is we do every one of them because everyone knows there's the famous Taisvis on Daf Yud and Makos. Say, wait a second. What about all the other Taisvises over there? Yes, or the Tosfai, as you might say. But anyway, so that's what I'm saying. That there's a lot out there, and you can't just ignore stuff. It exists and it's important.
Speaking about ignoring, it makes me think a little bit about I've heard, at least from the way you've taught in the past.
Yeah.
And the groups of kids that you've taught in different yeshivot and seminaries might be called not the typical group of students, right? So like, how do you, if you want to say it like that, but how do you approach teaching, the students that might not get as much attention or not like the typical mainstream?
I'll tell you, the thing is that I imagine that there's some people out there on the planet that they want to teach the smart kids or the, I don't know what, the motivated kids and all that kind of stuff. But I would always be, I think it's nice, the interesting kids, the neurodivergent kind of kids, And then also it's a bit of a challenge, but also, listen, I'm going to say like this. Sometimes, you read about Gedolim and you say, oh, this is Gadol, he sat for hours on end in the base Midreshet. Okay. A lot of times, part of that is their temperament. Some people are born and they say, I like to play outside. Some people, I like to read a book. I grew up big reading book guy, yes? Mm-hmm. And I know that within Judaism, the way yeshivas and seminaries operate, a lot of it is like textual, sit in a class kind of thing. Some Jewish human beings, that's not how they're structured, yes? Mm-hmm. And then they come to yeshiva and they're in these, and they're like, how am I going to do this Gemara? So I said, listen, we got to make it accessible to everybody. My feeling is that if you teach, you can teach in a way that even someone who's not a very textual kind of person by personality can still enjoy and can still get the geschmack of Torah and to be connected on that level. Rather than being like some of us might know people that because they couldn't like sit and read, they sort of got sort of pushed to the side of Judaism, you know, and you don't want that to happen to everyone. And you know, and the thing is, after a while, you get a way to like sniff out. Like you're in a class and you can tell, this person needs a little bit, you know, you got to sort of go over to them. You got to reach out to them a little bit. You got to something. And that's always exciting. You know, they say, you're not going to get these kids in the beginning. Oh, I'll tell you a true story. I had a student of mine in Nativ, right? This kid was, if he's watching this, he'll know who he is. But he was like a bit of a troublemaker, yes? And he was like, I'm going to say he would present himself half as a thug, you know? Big, scary, intimidating guy. Okay. One time I invite him over to my house. I'm like, listen, I got some gardening to do. You look like a big guy. You could help me with this. Comes over. We're gardening together. Very, very nice. And then he says, I know what you're doing. This is a Rebbe trick. You're trying to be my friend, you know? And I'm like, listen, man, I just need someone to pull some weeds. And you're a big guy. You could pull weeds. You could reach branches what I can't reach. Anyway, bottom line is, fast forward many years, he's living in Israel right now, married with a bunch of kids, doing great, and we're in touch. So sometimes, you know, those things, you know, it works. You know, you just meet a person, you make a connection, try to bring them into the Jewish world in a fashion.
You know, being somebody that teaches students, as you were saying, that have a hard time, let's say, fitting in the system and picking up certain learning topics as fast as
that's what they get me. The kids who hate yeshiva, the kids who hate Gemara, they put in my shiur. That's who it was. Yeah.
So I'll phrase a question to you. If somebody's listening to this, right, and they might be struggling in any area of Judaism or learning, what would your advice be to them?
My advice is like this. Listen, sometimes people come over to me, they say, I don't like Gemara. Yeah? I'm saying, you don't like Gemara? Saying you don't like Gemara is like, I don't know what, like you don't like dairy. Like, there's so many kinds of dairy. You got your cheddar cheese, you got your milk chocolate, you got ice cream, Parmesan. There's all kinds of stuff. And that's what I say. Within Judaism, Torah is a huge, huge spectrum. Within Gemara, you have Iyun, you have Bekiyas, you have Halacha, you have Agada, you have Mishnah, you have all kinds of things out there. Medrash, you could have Chumash and Rashi. I'm saying that you don't have to be necessarily someone that learns Gemara all the time or whatever it is, but there's enough in there that everybody could find something for them. Some people it's Chassidus, some people it's other kind of Kabbalah, whatever it is. And I'm going to say, don't give up and just find that thing that's going to be your way of connecting.
Do you think there's a midah or a character trait, let's say, that people have within them that generally help them get over that hump? Like, is there one unique thing that you've seen within people?
Yes, which is optimism. It is when a person can say things can change and I have the power to make things change. And then someone approaches and says, you know what? All my life I've been struggling, but you know what? Rambam, I can read. It's short, it's clear, I can do a little bit every day. I'm going to do Rambam. And then a person says, I can turn this thing around. That's the midah that you need, to feel that. And also, part of the optimism is that you say, even if I take small steps, that's going to be something. I say, it's like, I'll tell you a story about a student of mine. So I like doing Daf Yomi, which is great. But that's also part of my personality because I got a little bit of the OCD and it goes well with it. You know, Daf, okay, good. Now I had this student and he's like, he tried to do Daf Yomi, couldn't do it. Then he says, tried to do Amud Yomi, couldn't do it. Then I run into him, I meet up with him in New York. He works at this big company, one of these Deloitte kind of things. Anyway, he meets me at lunchtime. He says, I do line Yomi. He says, I learn one line of Gemara a day. The next day I do another line and I chazer the previous 6 or 7 lines. He says, and that's what works for him. I'm like, okay, But this is a thing. You're at least doing something, right? And you're doing a little thing, and then over time, you're like, hey, listen, I did something. I did a parak, I did. So you have to have that optimism and the belief that even little changes will add up and turn into something.
I could not agree more. I think that advice is very practical for a lot of people.
100%. Yeah.
I want to now shift actually to something that I find very interesting about you is that you took a trip to Africa a bunch of years ago.
Yeah.
And something very special
I went to the motherland.
Tell me about what went down in the motherland.
So I'll tell you what happened. So first of all, I'll say that part of what my family likes to do in general is to travel and visit other countries. I know that there's some people that, are not into it, but I think, the same way that, in life you can do a lot of things. This world is a very, very big planet, and there's all kinds of places there, and there's a lot of interesting and different things to see. Just to go somewhere different, oh, look, they're dressed, they talk, they have this. It's different, it's nice, very, very nice. We do these family trips. Now, my daughter, my oldest daughter, Kinamon, did Shirut Leumi with new Olim Ethiopian families. Good. And after she did her Shirut Leumi, she told us, I'd like to go visit Ethiopia. I want to go to Ethiopia. So we said, you know what? If you're going to go to Ethiopia, we'll all go to Ethiopia. Let's just have a family trip to Ethiopia. And then we're saying, wait a second. If we go to Ethiopia, it can't be like every other country that we go. Like you get to visit and this. We have to go. We got to do something with the community. So the only time in our family that it worked out for everyone to be able to go was during Pesach. So I start calling around. I'm like, yeah, Pesach in Ethiopia, what's the deal? And then I found a Jewish agency. They said, actually, we need a rabbi to go there to help with Pesach, do the Seder, and all this business. And I'm like, hey, I'm a rabbi. So they're like, okay. And then we went down, and that's what we did. We were there, a little bit before Pesach, during Pesach, and after Pesach. And my kids did Hebrew classes for the people there. My 4 children, my son taught them enlightening, and we had halacha classes, and it was just a grand old time. It was great. Plus, also, we all lost weight. It was the only time go away for Pesach and you get wind up with a net weight loss. Very nice. Anyway, when we go there, then we come home. And of course, we feel just guilty about our very existence, when you're in the, and some of the listeners maybe have visited a third world country in the past, right? But it's a pretty intense experience, and it makes you really appreciate what you have. And we said, we got to help. We can't just go back to regular life. We got to help the people over there. And being that I had experience in yeshiva and seminary, I'm like, first of all, a lot of them wanted to come to yeshiva to learn. Fine. But then there were some boys that we met there that we said, listen, we got to bring them here. They should go to college here. What are they doing? They're wasting their talents, just waiting when the government is going to approve their aliyah, which is years and years and years and years. So we worked out, we sort of found a loophole in the various Misrad HaPnim regulations at the time, and we worked out student visas for people, and we'd bring them over, and a bunch of people came to yeshiva, but also 2 boys came to Machon Lev, to college over there. And, they come, we had to show them like how to do, we got them laptops, we had to show them like how to shop, and, we'd help them with their studies in the beginning. Then after a while, it got too complicated. Like, I don't know computer science. There's only so much I can know. But we helped them, and that, now I'll tell you, but what's the trick? Now, these boys are now here happily ever after. Their parents made aliyah now too, and all of that. But what's the whole idea? We said, listen, we can't save the whole world, right? The whole of Ethiopian community we can't save. But could we help a few people? And that's the whole thing when I'm saying that if you can't, maybe you can't do everything, but you can do a little thing. And that little thing is a very big deal. It can make a big impact, right? Like you do Daf Yomi, it adds up. So 1 or 2 people, and it has a huge impact, right? Ultimately on planet Earth, yes. Yeah.
So I was actually speaking with my wife, and she told me that there's a story.
Yes.
The blind story. What is that?
Okay, so the blind story is like this. Okay, I'm going to have to frame it in this fashion. We got these 2 boys to come to Israel on a student visa. There was no such thing as Ethiopians coming to Israel on student visas up until that time. It did not exist. There were so many complications that made it that no one could do it. First of all, you need to have a ticket to show them. No one could afford a ticket. Luckily, an old student of mine is now a travel agent, and he had a mechanism of providing tickets that he could then cancel within like 72 hours or something, but it was like a legit ticket during that time without laying down the money. Anyway, so we worked that out to show the people at the embassy. Good. And then we had to work out all these like technical things. Yes? Fine. And then the student visa is only for 1 year. So every year it had to be renewed, but it had to be renewed in Israel and in Misrat Apnim. And every time we would go, the Misrat Apnim people would say, there was no such thing as Ethiopians here on a student visa. Like this is not a thing. So it was a whole issue every year trying to get their visas renewed. It was very, very complicated. We had to go to like a new place and like say, oh, this Misrat Apnim office just opened. The people here are new and, maybe it'll work here. Anyway, it was all legal, but it was very complicated, we were going to say. Anyway, during COVID, the Misrat Apnim offices, you can't go. There's no appointments, no nothing. And we had to get there to renew student visa. And they say, we are not renewing student visas at this time. This is not happening. So here's the thing. Now, I would always keep my Teudat Zehut non-biometric. Always not. It's even non-biometric to this day.
Can you explain what that means for?
Oh, yeah. Biometric is the fancy new ones that have the chip in it, that you can do exciting fancy things with. And the man can track you or whatever. But that's the biometric thing. I have the old school laminated, like your Brooklyn Public Library card, So I keep it that way. Why? Because for these guys, if I ever had to make an appointment at Misrat Apnim, and they're like, yeah, we're not doing student visas, I'd sign up for a biometric Teudat Zehut, get an appointment, then I come in, I'm like, listen, actually I'm here for the student visa, and we'd like finagle it and make it work. Now, at the time during COVID, they wouldn't even let that happen because you could only come in like you yourself. Like I couldn't bring a friend. Like I would always come with them. I'd say, oh, biometric Teudat Zehut. Then I'm in the door. I'm like, okay, for real, you got to renew these guys' visas. And then, it would work out. Now, but the thing is that during COVID, they wouldn't even let that. So what am I going to do? So this is my trick. So I bring the guy with me one at a time, yeah? And I have these sunglasses at home. We call them the Ray Charles glasses because they're these big wraparound giant sunglasses, like as if you got the glaucoma or something. You know what? Like the old folk, they wear over their glasses, these gigantic things. Anyway, so I'd put that on and then I'd go with one of the boys on my arm, and I'd walk in like that. And then I never said anything, but they made an assumption that I was, let's call it visually impaired, and that this African person was my aide. And then they let us in. Then I take off the glasses and do my regular shtick of, yeah, honestly, I'm here for the student visa, so let's make that happen. But again, that was like, I think it's within the parameters of legality, we can say. But, you had to do it to get this kind of stuff done. You got to think outside the box. Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. That was probably one of the best stories I've heard on this podcast.
That's what happened. Now I'll tell you, listen to this. So these guys, were in charge of their clothing. We got them clothing and all kinds of stuff. You know where I get their clothing from? Nativ, end of the year. The boys leave stuff behind. Then you got to get decked out, American Eagle, all this. And what about shampoo? Oh, Midmo Harova, they get the keratin-induced, I don't know what, Vidal Sassoon, I would collect it at the end. They throw it in the garbage, And the boy, they even to this day, they say, oh, we're going. They come over for Shabbos 2 weeks ago or something. They're like, oh, we're going to the attic. That's where I keep it all. Like, and they collect all the toiletries and then they take it with them. It's from there. That's what it is. But it was free stuff that would just go into garbage. So what the heck? I'm saying that there's all kinds of stuff everywhere that people just don't notice. And you're like, you could do some good stuff with it. Yeah.
I can't help but think, talking about, getting the visas and the whole process of kind of call it getting these kids integrated into society.
Sure.
What would you say is like the hardest, or what was the hardest part of getting these Ethiopian kids integrated into a completely new
The hardest
society?
Thing for them, okay, so I'll tell you like this. Ethiopia, very old school place. Very, very old school. Now I'll tell you just so you'll know and the audience will know. Out of all of Africa, Ethiopia never been colonized. So it's like their like regular way. The way they tell time in Ethiopia, listen to this, is that 7 in the morning, they call 1. 8 in the morning, 2. 9 in the morning, 3. Because sunrise is around 7. In other words, their clock is sha'ot zmaniyot, like in the Gemara. You know how they count? That's what it is to this day. Also over there, there's no rush to do anything. Like, there's like not much going on. And like, you don't have to like push it. Like, you just sort of like, I don't know what, mosey through life a little bit. When they came here, we're like, listen, time is time. And they were like, in the first time, they're like, hey, I heard you, like, I would know the people in Machon Lev would keep me updated. They say, you missed class. Why'd you miss class? They say, we didn't wake up. Like, why didn't you wake up? Like, well, when we woke up, it was already class had started. I'm like, you got to set an alarm. And we had, this kind of stuff. And like, always missing buses. I'm like, things are on time over here. It's not like, there was like, I don't know, like, you just like show up and like, oh, it'll open later, it'll open, who knows, right? So the time management and the rushing of the life in Israel, I would say the intensity, that was something very, very new for them. Which is the good part was that over there davening, the shul where they would daven, like the structure that they would daven, you'd go into daven, there was no clock, no time. You finish when you finish. Nobody left before it was over. At the end of davening, there was extra time. People would just sit quietly doing their own tefillot in their head. And that you don't have, so there's positives about that also, like, for Shabbos and davening and things like that. And I told you it's important for you to retain that, but like in working life and school life, you got, yeah.
So from traveling for so many years, as you mentioned before, you and your family are big travelers.
Sure.
What are, I guess you could say, some of the coolest experiences and the biggest and most like important things that you've learned through going to see different parts of the world and different people?
Wow. Okay, listen, I had a cool experience when we went to Japan. We went to Kyoto in Japan, and in Kyoto, there is a group of Christians there, Christian Japanese folk, that their leader from, I don't know, like a generation ago, told them that you have to be nice to Jewish people, and they are fluent in Hebrew. So you go to this place in Kyoto, and the guy greets you, oh, shalom, anishma, talking Hebrew like an Israeli person. And they have within their building there and their museum and all that, they have free lodging for Israelis. They say, if you come to Kyoto and you're from Israel, Jewish person, you want to visit, you book ahead of time, we have. And they have like free little juice boxes. And it's like wild. It is so nice to meet people on planet Earth that like Jewish people. That is a very, very positive kind of thing, Oh, and then when I was out, and this happens all the time. So when we travel, sometimes I have this big red Bukharian kippah that just looks like weird. And you wear it, and then nobody knows like what you are or whatever, Then I went, and in Zanzibar, this Maasai tribesman, these tall people, he says to me, he starts saying, are you Muslim? And I said, no, Yahud, because I show him like, it's like a kippah. And then he was like, oh, yeah, Musa, like Moses, it's nice. It's nice to see that people like Jewish people in the world. That's a good thing.
So I based off of everything that you're telling me, we've gone through dealing with the students in yeshivot and seminaries that were, call it overlooked. Yes. And now going to a place like Ethiopia and getting kids that, nobody else in the world would probably have done what you did.
Right. People, just overlook them, I guess you could say, yeah.
I think that's something very unique about you and how you go about your life and do things. So do you have any role models or kind of like what inspired you to really put your koach into those that call it are overlooked or not as, overlooked?
I don't know what to say about that, honestly, but it's just something I will say, Avi, that I feel that just everybody deserves a shot. And it's, to me, a bit not fair that there are certain people that because of their skill set they are going to automatically get a lot of the attention. And I'm like, but there's like other people out there and, who are different, and it's okay and it's good. And just that they should be happy and that they should feel part of things. That's what I always felt about people, something like that.
So do you have any advice, let's say for somebody like me or anybody that's listening of, you might go through your day-to-day life, right? And you might not pick up on, that person is not getting enough attention. Like, do you have any advice on that?
Okay, so here's the thing. Number one is don't be embarrassed to approach somebody. A lot of times there's someone who's like always very quiet, and then you say to them, hey, my line is at Harova, sometimes I say to them, we go through it and I say, what's your deal? And they're like, what do you mean, what's your deal? I'm like, oh, tell me your deal. What's your deal? And then, they say something about themselves. And here's a person, and they start opening up. And that's, so I'm saying, and then in the Rova, this happens to me almost every day. I see somebody, they look confused. I'm like, hey, do you need some help? Can I help you? Sometimes they say, yeah, they might be Christians. They're like, where's the Last Supper room? By now I know where it is because so many people ask me.
Where is it, by the way?
It's near Kever David. But honestly, the same way Kever David is not really Kever David, the Last Supper room, not really Last Supper room. But, it's their deal, so whatever. But, and then, so when you see, you have to not be embarrassed to put yourself out there and then maybe be a little bit of like a weirdo or strange and just give people an opportunity to express themselves. Because the bottom line is everyone has something to say. Everyone is a person. They have an inner life that's going on over here. And just because they're more introverted or they don't, like to talk about it doesn't mean that they have that also. And it's just you give them the opportunity. Yeah?
Wow. I think, first of all, I think that's amazing advice. And, I think something that I'm picking up from you, of course, as I said, when we first came into this room.
Yeah.
And for those that are listening and watching this, we've never met before today.
That's
I've only
right.
heard your voice through my wife's voice. And
I just saw you on the YouTube. Yeah.
You have a tremendous passion and like a fire to you that like you're just super energetic. And through all the things that you do, through all the teaching and there's just passion there. So what has fueled you and what keeps you going through all these years to keep doing what you're doing?
Listen, I'll tell you what I like, and what I liked as from when I was a little kid is learning new things. Learning new things to me is always fun, and that's why I like to go to new countries. When we go to other countries, everyone, I'll tell you something about vacations, just so everyone will know. Everyone in their mind has a different view of what is a vacation, right? Some people say, what's a vacation? That we go out to eat, I don't have to cook. What's a vacation? I want to sit and chill. To me, part of a vacation is see new things. And there's to be learning new things, there's always something new to learn. There's always something new to see. There's always new people to hear from and to see what they're about. And that way, you will never be bored in life. And there's always something exciting to look forward to.
How many countries have you been to?
I don't even count. I don't know. A whole bunch. I don't know. Just at a certain point, like I don't even know. Croatia, Russia, Japan. Of course, the regular places, France, Italy, Germany, Zanzibar, Seychelles, Maldives. I don't know. Ethiopia, Kenya. All these places. Denmark, Sweden. Yeah.
How do you pull off going to a place where, is there Chabad in every location you've been to? Or?
Yeah, okay. I'll tell you about that. No, I don't. I usually don't go to Chabad. I like to hang out with the locals first of all. I like the local people, and all that. But just fine. Chabad is good too. But I like the locals, and I'm like, eat fruits and vegetables. Fruits and vegetables is fine. I go to these places. Go to Africa. There's jackfruit, breadfruit, all these like wacky things. It's fruit. So what? I could fill up. I would have in Africa, my wife says, I love it there because there's a pineapple left and right. Yeah, eat a whole pineapple. That's breakfast. There you go. You're full. It has all those strings. I guess that's fiber, whatever. It's good for you. And I think maybe sometimes Jewish people, they get so up into food. Like, what are you going to eat? No one's going to starve. Yes, you're going to get an apple. You're hungry, eat another apple. You cut up a nice salad. In Denmark, you find some lox. There's always good stuff around. There's really always good stuff.
If somebody said to you, okay, Rav Ron,
yeah,
I have one chance to go on a vacation, where am I going?
I would say I'll tell you, the place that I would say that I really enjoyed, it was in Maldives, but don't go to regular Maldives. We went to Felidhu. You go to an island that tourists don't go to, and you just live on one of those islands for a week. That's what it is, yes? Not the hotels. Don't go to resorts. You live with the people. Get an Airbnb in the middle of nowhere and just live there. Go on fishing boats and chill. That's what you do.
Okay, so that's, I guess, going to be the next location my wife and I go to if we ever have a chance to go on another vacation.
Yeah. You will have. It's all good.
I want to revert back to what we were saying before we got, diverted a little bit. When you brought these Ethiopian kids into Israel, and now you, of course, they had parents, as you mentioned, right? Yes. They weren't fully your children, but like, what was that experience like for you? Do you look at them as if they're your own kids?
We do. They refer to me as Abba. They refer to my wife as Ima. But then they have different names for their own parents. And they refer to my children, and my children refer to them as brother, sister. But I will tell you something, that my part of the idea that I have also in relationships with Talmidim is that it's important to give people their space. A lot of times with the Rebbe-student relationship as well, the Rebbe has to know when to a little bit do, let's call it like a tzimtzum a little bit. Because you have to let people be people and let them be themselves. So I don't usually use the term like adopted or anything like that. I just say we look after them, we take care, because they got to be independent, and they have to have their elbow room to make their decisions. And we give advice, and they say, hey, I'm dating this girl, or I have this opportunity, and all of this kind of stuff, as grown children, might speak to you about. But also with Talmidim, and I'm going to say like this, the relationship between sometimes also a Rebbe and a Talmid in a yeshiva setting is one thing, but as people get older, then they're like people. And you have to know how the things are going to shift like that, and you have to give people their space. And that's a very important thing in all relationships.
I find that actually very interesting, and I want to touch on just more big adult in general, this idea of doing something that's very different. Do you have any thought or any advice for somebody that has an opportunity in front of them that might not be the typical path? Like I doubt anybody in your own circle or in a much broader circle that is willing to take people from Ethiopia, find any way to get them to Israel, like in terms of doing something that's out of the box. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts or advice for people to kind of encourage them to do maybe something like that?
Well, number one, you have to have a good support team. So my wife was super duper on board, and me and her, I'm kind of like the face of it, but it was really us together that did the whole thing. And my kids were 100% on board too. And there were different things that everybody had to help with, and in their own roles. So number one is you have to have a good background. Listen, you know what? Let's say like this. It's the Omer. This is a special Omer episode. I got my beard, and they say Rabbi Akiva and his students. This is the Omer time. Yes, Rabbi Akiva, he changed his life. Right, 40 years old, starts going to yeshiva, and he makes a change, does something unheard of in his life. But what do they always talk about? That his wife was his support, yes? If you have some support, then that gives you the elbow room to just take a leap and try something wild. And if there's a guy who says, I have an idea, I have a dream, I want to do this and that. If he has, a wife, or if she has a husband and a support team that's like, follow your dream, do your thing, then it can turn into something, yes? So you need that kind of support thing is good. Also, that anchors you because, you're doing something wild, but then you're still connected to planet Earth, which you got to be as well, right? You can't just go completely off the rails. Yeah.
It seems, by the way, that you're very masech at what you're doing, so it just really speaks to your Rebbitzin, who I'm sure she's listening to this right now.
Thank you.
So I actually want to channel our conversation a little bit back to the yeshiva and STEM world that you taught. And of course, you have the students when they're in Eretz Yisrael and you're developing them, but after they leave, I know you work a lot with alumni and work on doing different singles events. So tell me a little bit about that.
I'll tell you what that is. So I would try to continue relationships even later on, but again, not in an oppressive way, not, like, you better call me. It's Rosh Hashanah. How come you're not calling me? Not that kind of stuff, but more like just to check in. Hey, how are you? What's going on? Yes. And I would tell the students, listen, you never be embarrassed. You could reach out no matter what, just tell me anything. It doesn't have to be a halachic question. I don't know, you're eating a bagel, you got one of those rainbow bagels, it looks interesting, send me a picture, yeah? And that's what I do also with them. Like when there's something that's like unusual, I'm like, look, it rained and there's a giant snail, here is a giant snail. And then I put my finger in so you can see the size, yeah? Okay. And that way, you maintain a connection. And that's the thing. Because in yeshiva, it's always, Rebbe, I don't understand this taisvus. Or, Rebbe, I don't know this question. I'm having a crisis. Okay, but at some point you grow up and you're not having existential crises all the time, yes? And then you could just be a people together. And that's what I like to transition into, and it's always exciting. Then they're like people. I go to their house, I'm there for Shabbos, I play with their kids when I visit. I had students that they were visiting me. I have a student, his child took his first steps walking in my house. He brought over, kid was like an infant on the cusp of walking in my house. He was on a visit to Israel. But it's Avira D'Eretz Yisrael Machkima, it gave the kid a little bit more intelligence. He could figure out how to walk okay. So that's the thing. And again, it's being not embarrassed. Not embarrassed. Some people are like, what the heck? What is this, a picture of a snail? What are you, some kind of weirdo? I'm like, maybe I am a weirdo. And maybe that's okay. I'm intrigued by a big snail. I think it's exciting, that kind of stuff. And then when I go to America, then I would we would call it the Rav Ron birthday party. Because I would say, listen, there's all these boys and girls, and how are they going to meet each other and, get married? So I said, I got to throw a singles event, and I just invite all my old students together and we'll hang out. And then I'd always put some student in charge. I'm like, hey, make an event. Okay. And then one time it was a pool hall in Koreatown. Like, I don't pick these things. It's like whatever it is, Sometimes, I don't know what, it's in the attic of, I don't know, weird things, and at somebody's house, whatever it is. But then they say you can't call it a singles event because then no one wants to come because then they're like losers or whatever. So we don't call it a Rav Ron's birthday party. And then come is Rav Ron's birthday party, Then we have games over there. Sometimes we have like whatever they come up with, like goofy things. I think that one time there was like a seltzer-based version of beer pong. Anyway, I like seltzer, so it was good. But so we do this kind of stuff. Then some kid after a few years says, Rav Ron, when is your birthday? Like every time you come, it's like, what's going on over here? But there's that's a code word. And I'm just saying that again, it's something not to be embarrassed to do. That's the whole thing. Basically, you can't really care too much about what other people think is what I'm saying. Boys gots to meet girls, girls gots to meet boys. That's just what has to happen. And you just have to get over yourself and you go somewhere and you're like, here we are, we're grown-ups and there's dip, maybe a little bit of sangria, and we're talking and it's okay. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So after the birthday party.
Yes, ma'am.
We'll gladly keep this part in the episode.
Okay. Yeah.
From doing so much with alumni, right?
Yes.
What is the most meaningful thing for you?
The most meaningful thing?
The most meaningful
to see someone grown up and on their own and taking care of themselves and living a good Jewish, normal Torah life. That is the thing, right? Especially, when you see kids and they had all kinds of struggles before, you're like, how is this going to work out? What's going to happen? But then they're like, yeah, that's it. Oh, I'll tell you, you want to hear a story? Listen to this story. One time, I'm talking to my students. This is boys, right? I say, all right, so what's everybody's plans for next year? And this one guy says, yeah, I don't have any plans. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't have any plans? What do you want to do with yourself? He says, I want to be an architect. I'm like, all right, so you got to go to architecture school. He's like, you're right. I said, go and find an architecture school that you're going to go to. Fine. Then he comes and he says, yeah, I got to apply to the school. The application is in 4 or 5 days. It's like, what? Get the application. Part of the application is he's got to draw stuff. He brings it in. I said, this is awful. I redid some of the things for him. Then he's like, it's got to be mailed by this day. How do we mail it? I'm like, I'm going to take you. And we went to the post office together in the old city and mailed it. So I helped this guy get into college. Now I'm going to say that he's not the most collegey kid, right? And it took him a bunch of extra years to get in to finish it. But he finished. I said to him, no matter what happens, as long as it takes, just be persistent. Just stay there and just do it. And now I met up with him recently and he graduated. He's got his first job now. He's married with a kid. And you're like, whoa, this is fantastic. Someone got to that point.
Wow. Okay. So I'm going to pose one final question to you.
Yes,
which
sir.
is, throughout all the students you've come across, and from anybody that's listening to this podcast, what's your message in a bottle that you would give to everybody that's like, take this, whether it could be a general cloud or anything you want to say to anybody that's listening, that like, take this message in a bottle, keep it with you wherever you go for the rest of your life?
The message is, honestly, you can do it. Whatever it is that you feel that you should be doing, you can do it. And you start with small steps, but do not feel in your mind that there is something I should be doing and I'm not doing it. If you feel you should be going to Minyan, then get up and go to Minyan. Yes? If you feel you should be learning, then learn. Learn for a little bit of time and do it. You can't have a version of yourself in your head that you are like a criminal, that you are no good. If you know it's something you're supposed to do, just do it, even if it's a small amount. And then you'll get there.
That is truly inspiring, and I'm going to keep that message in my bottle and keep it with me wherever I go.
Thank you.
In terms of, before we go, I have to hear a little bit about the sefer that you just wrote from Koren. So take me a little bit through that.
Okay.
And kind of what your future plans are, what's coming, and
All right. So first, I'll tell you like this. My approach also to being a Rebbe and a teacher in the seminary yeshiva world is the college professor model. And the model is that when you're a college professor, you're not only supposed to be teaching, you're also supposed to be doing research, and you're also supposed to be publishing your research. That's what college professors do. I said, that's what you're supposed to do also as a Rebbe, as a teacher in the yeshiva seminary world. And therefore, I like to research topics, things that other people haven't written about. I'm like, I try to look up something, and like, nobody wrote about this. What's the answer? Then I try to figure it out. So this led me to writing a book on all the big and small letters in Tanakh to provide explanations that I collected. Because I'm like, people look at this, there's a big letter here or a small letter, and they say, why is this here? And you can't find an answer. It's like, what the heck? So I have that. And then I wrote a sequel to it. That was Sefer Katan V'Gadol. Then I wrote a sequel, which is Ha'ikar Chaser, which talks about why words are written, spelled differently in different places in Tanakh, either with a Vav or without a Vav, with a Yud or without a Yud. Now, I'll tell you the backstory. One time we were on a Gedolim trip. Well, it's raining. That's good.
Sorry for all the listeners. It is pouring above our head.
Yeah, it's raining. It's nice. It's not. It's good for taking a nap a little bit. It's a nice sound over there. Well, do we have any warm blankies to cuddle in? All right, but I'll tell you what happened was we're on a Gedolim trip one time, and one of the Rebbeim brought his little tiny kid, must have been like first or second grader, to the Gedolim trip. And he asks, and they say, do you want to say anything to the Gadol? Do you have a question for the Gadol? And the kid asked this question. All right? The kid asked this question. I'll say loud into the thing. They say, how come in this one place, when it says Balak ben Sipor, Sipor is without a Vav? That's what he asks. Now, the Gadol, offhand, does not have who has an answer to that? Offhand, like this? Nobody knows. I'm like, if little kids are asking this question, we got to have answers for them. So that's why I wrote that.
So also, aside from that story you just said about the letters and everything, what is the new sefer you have coming out with Koren? And where can people find it? And take me through that.
So it's at the printer right now. They're making it right now. And it's called Jewish Customs. And it's about Jewish customs. Wow. But it's based on really my Minhagim class that I teach, where there are certain customs that explore where they came from. And like we have a chapter there on how it started, that people started walking out for Yizkor. And it's always not like what anyone thinks it is. What does everybody say? You walk out for Yizkor, why? Because it's an ayin hara to stay in, or anyway.
Wait, what's the answer? How did it?
The real reason?
Yeah.
I'll tell you the real reason. That originally, when it was Yizkor, it was in shul, they would use it for people to give tzedakah and like make a Yizkor appeal. You know how they even do Yizkor appeals now? Yizkor appeal is ancient. From the beginning when Yizkor was established, post-Crusades, it already was an appeal. Now you tell me, in every shul on planet Earth, what do little kids do during the appeal? They walk out because it's not davening. And the parents call them back in. That's how it started. That's how it really stared. Then we have all kinds of stuff like that no one thinks of, like how this kind of thing started.
Give me another one. Come on.
Oh, like challahs being twisted. Challahs being braided. Why are challahs braided? How did that start? Oh, why do we dip the karpas into salt water? What do you say? Why do you dip karpas into salt water?
I mean, the Kasonas possum and the whole with the blood, but that's all I know.
Yeah. Okay, but the real reason, this is it. The original idea of having it, Tosfot says, what do you dip into? Either salt water or vinegar. That's the Rashbam. Yes, the Rashbam says, Tosfos brings it down. Salt water or vinegar. Everyone says, oh, it's the tears of the Jewish people. Well, what about the vinegar? No one cries vinegar, yes? I'll tell you what it is. Salt water and vinegar were the most ancient, in the times of the Rishonim, salad dressings. What do you dip your karpas into? Salad dressing. That's what it is. It's a salad course in the beginning of the meal. And that's why the little kid says, why are we dipping twice? Because when you go to any normal function, how many salad courses are there? One. And he's like, what the heck? That's the whole thing. You know, over time, now that we develop Thousand Island and Ranch, we don't associate salt water and vinegar with salad dressings anymore. So then people gave them different explanations. So we try to get to the core of where things really came from. That's what it is, yes.
I'm fascinated, and I think my wife Yali and I are going to have to buy the Sefer and read it.
Yeah, it'll be on Amazon and all that. Like,
what do you know? What the release date?
Koran.
What's the release date? Do we know?
The release date? Nah, they told me after Pesach, so now it's after Pesach. Hopefully it'll be before Shavuos.
Midreshet, this episode should be out in a few weeks, so hopefully that time will be out.
Yeah, it'll be good time and good synergy.
I just want to end by thanking you so much for taking the time to come.
Yeah,
this was
it's my pleasure. It's
awesome.
been a blast, obviously.
Hopefully you guys got to see when the camera switched to me that I was really thoroughly enjoying this. And hopefully we'll have you back again soon.
No, it was lovely talking to you, really, really.
Thank you so much.
All right.
I hope you guys enjoyed listening to that episode as much as I enjoyed being the interviewer. Rav Ron is absolutely awesome. And if you're listening to this again, Rav Ron, you're the best. Thank you so much for coming on the show. If you guys enjoyed listening to this, feel free to give us a like, a share, and just help get this out there to as many Yidden as possible. Looking forward to seeing you guys in next week's episode. Thank you so much for watching.